left in a collapsed shack. Please don't leave us. The cowboy made a choice that changed everything. The wind came down from the north that morning like it always did in late October, cold and mean, and carrying the smell of coming rain. It moved through the tall dry grass and bent it sideways, and it rattled the wooden sign hanging above the entrance to the small town of Red Rock Crossing, a town that was not much more than a handful of buildings pressed together against the flat brown earth of the frontier, as if the buildings themselves were afraid of the wide open space that surrounded them on every side. Red Rock Crossing had a general store, a blacksmith, a saloon that doubled as a place where men came to argue and drink and sometimes forget the hardness of their lives, a small church with a crooked cross on its roof, and a livery stable at the far end of the main street where horses stood in the shadows and swished their tails at flies. There was also a sheriff's office, though the sheriff himself had not been seen in nearly 3 weeks, and people had stopped expecting him to come back. The town sat in the middle of a valley that had once been green and full of promise, back when the first settlers had come through and planted their flags in the earth and declared that this was going to be something. But the years had been hard. The drought had come and stayed longer than anyone had expected. The cattle had grown thin, and some of the ranchers had packed their things and moved on, following rumors of better land farther west. The ones who remained were stubborn or poor or both, and they went about their days with the slow and careful movements of people who had learned not to expect too much from life. It was into this town, on that cold October morning, that a man rode alone. He came from the direction of the eastern hills, following the old trail that cut through the scrubland and wound down into the valley like a crooked finger. He rode a dark brown horse, tall and well-built, the kind of animal that had been cared for properly over a long time. The man himself was broad across the shoulders and lean in the way that comes not from hunger, but from years of hard work under an open sky. He wore a battered hat with a wide brim that had been shaped by weather and time into something that was uniquely his own, and his clothes were dusty from the road. At his hip he carried a pistol in a worn leather holster, and across the back of his saddle there was a rifle in a scabbard. He was not young, but he was not old either. He existed somewhere in the middle of life, in that space where a man has already seen enough of the world to know that it is not always kind, but has not yet given up on the possibility that it could be. His name was Cole Hadley. He had been riding for 6 days, coming up from the south, where he had finished a job driving cattle for a rancher who had paid him fairly and sent him off with a handshake and a small sack of provisions for the road. Cole had no particular destination in mind. He rarely did. He moved from place to place as work appeared, taking on whatever needed doing, driving cattle, mending fences, clearing land, doing the kind of rough and necessary labor that the frontier produced in endless supply. He was not the kind of man who stayed in one place long enough to put down roots. He had tried that once, years ago, and it had not gone well. Since then he had found it easier to keep moving. He rode into Red Rock Crossing slowly, letting his horse set the pace, and he looked at the town with the calm and measuring eyes of a man who had ridden into 100 towns just like it. He noted the quiet streets, the few people who moved between the buildings with their heads down against the wind, the dogs that lay in the dust near the saloon and watched him pass without bothering to get up. He tied his horse at the post outside the general store and went inside to buy what he needed: a small bag of coffee, some dried beans, a tin of salt, a length of rope, and the woman behind the counter, a stout woman with gray hair and a no-nonsense expression, took his coins and counted out his change without saying more than was necessary. He was about to leave when the man came in. He was an older man, perhaps 60, with a weathered face and the kind of worried look that settles into a person's features and becomes permanent. He came in quickly, the door banging behind him, and he looked around the store until his eyes found the woman behind the counter. "Martha," he said, and his voice was tight with something. "You hear about the Dolan place?" The woman named Martha looked up from the coins she had been sorting. "What about it?" "Roof came down," the old man said. "Back half of the structure. Walt Dolan took his wagon and left 3, maybe 4 days ago. Said he was going to Milford to see about a debt, but the children are still there. Somebody saw smoke from the chimney yesterday, thought everything was fine, But this morning one of the preacher boys rode past and said the whole back section of the shack has come down. Said he could hear something from inside. Martha's expression changed. How many children? 2, the old man said. A boy and a girl. Young ones. The girl is maybe 4, 5 years old. Boy is a year or 2 older. Where's Walt Dolan now? Nobody knows. He should have been back by now. Milford is a day's ride there and a day back, even going slow. Martha pressed her lips together. And nobody has gone to check on those children? I came straight here, the old man said. I was hoping to find somebody who could ride out there. It is about 4 miles east, past the creek crossing, and up the rise toward the old timber line. I would go myself, but my knee has been bad since last week, and I cannot ride. There was a silence in the store. Cole had been standing near the door, his purchases in his hands, and he had listened to all of this, without moving. He was not the kind of man who involved himself in other people's troubles, as a general rule. He had learned that getting involved often led to complications, and complications had a way of keeping a man tied to a place longer than he intended. But something in the way the old man had said the words, 2 children, young ones, had settled into Cole's chest, and was sitting there now, quiet and insistent, like a splinter you cannot ignore. He set his things down on the counter. If this story is keeping you hooked, both the old man and Martha looked at him. It means the world. Martha had the expression of someone trying to decide now, let's get back whether a stranger was trustworthy. The old man just looked relieved. You know where the Dolan place is? The old man asked. East, past the creek crossing and up toward the timberline, Cole said. You just told me. The old man nodded. It is a shack. Not much to look at. Used to be a proper homestead, but Walt Dolan, he let things go after his wife passed. There's a fence with a broken gate and an old water barrel near the front door. Cole nodded and picked up his things. I will pay you, the old man said quickly. I do not have much, but... No need, Cole said, and he went out the door. He remounted and turned his horse east, following the main street out of town and onto the trail that wound through the dry grassland. The wind was still coming down from the north, and it pushed against his back as he rode, as if it were in a hurry to get somewhere. The sky above was the color of old pewter, low and full of clouds that had not yet decided what they wanted to do. Cole rode at a steady pace, not rushing but not dawdling either. He let his mind go quiet the way it did when he was on the trail, settling into the rhythm of the horse's movement, watching the land around him with the practiced attention of a man who had spent most of his adult life outdoors. He had learned long ago to read the land the way other men read books, looking for signs of water, for the tracks of animals, for the subtle changes in color and texture that told you something about what had happened here and what might be coming. He crossed the dry creek, just a shallow depression in the earth, with a thin trickle of brown water running along its lowest point, and followed the trail up the rise toward the line of sparse trees at the top. The trees here were scrub oak and juniper, twisted and low to the ground, shaped by the constant wind into leaning postures that made them look like they were all pointing in the same direction. He smelled the place before he saw it. There was smoke, faint and irregular, not the steady smoke of a properly burning fire, but the thin and stuttering smoke of something burning in a space that was not giving it enough air. Cole slowed his horse and came over the rise and saw the shack below him. It had been a homestead once, as the old man had said. You could still see the bones of what it had been, the fence running crookedly around a small yard, the water barrel near the door, the remains of what might once have been a garden along the south wall. But years of neglect and the recent structural failure had reduced it to something that looked less like a home and more like something the earth was in the process of reclaiming. The back half of the structure had indeed come down. The roof had collapsed inward, and the back wall had given way and folded outward, and the whole rear section of the shack was now a pile of old timber and broken boards and rusted metal. The front section was still standing, but it leaned at an angle that made Cole's jaw tighten when he looked at it. There was a thin line of smoke coming from the chimney at the front. Cole dismounted and tied his horse to the fence post and walked to the front door. It was ajar, hanging slightly open, and through the gap he could see dim light and the glow of a low fire. He pushed the door open slowly and looked inside. The room was small and cluttered. There was a rough table, 2 chairs, a cot against one wall, a fireplace at the far end with a fire that had burned down to a few red coals, and a small flame that was barely keeping itself alive. The walls were dark with age, and the single window was so dirty that it let in very little of the gray morning light. The whole structure groaned softly in the wind, and Cole could see, where the back wall had been, a rough barrier that had been constructed from whatever was available, a length of planking, an old blanket, a section of the collapsed roof that had fallen at an angle and created an accidental partition. Beyond this barrier, through the gaps, Cole could see the tangled wreckage of the collapsed rear section, and in front of the fireplace, huddled together on the floor, were two small children. The girl was very young, perhaps 4 years old, with tangled dark hair and wide eyes that looked up at Cole with an expression that mixed fear and desperate hope in equal measure. She was small and thin, and her dress was dirty and torn at the hem. She was holding the hand of the boy beside her, gripping it with both of her small hands, and she did not let go when Cole came in. The boy was older, maybe 6 or 7. He had the same dark hair as his sister and the same wide eyes, but his expression was different. It was the expression of someone who has taken on more responsibility than they can really carry, the expression of a child who has been trying very hard to be an adult. He sat up straighter when Cole entered, pulling himself up to his full height in a way that was both brave and heartbreaking. "Who are you?" the boy said. It was not quite a question. "My name is Cole," Cole said. He kept his voice level and easy, the way he would talk to a spooked horse. He did not move further into the room. He crouched down in the doorway, so that he was not towering over them. "I heard about the roof coming down. I came to see if you were all right." The boy looked at him for a long moment. The girl was still clutching his hand. Her eyes had not moved from Cole's face. "The back went down in the night," the boy said. "2 nights ago. We were asleep. We woke up and it was loud, and then it stopped. Papa is not here." "I know," Cole said. "Where did you sleep after the back went down?" "Here," the boy said, gesturing at the floor in front of the fireplace. "I kept the fire going. I know how to keep the fire going." "You did well," Cole said, and he meant it. 2 nights. A 6-year-old boy keeping a fire going for 2 nights in a half-collapsed shack in the cold, taking care of his little sister. Cole had seen grown men do less. "Is Papa coming back?" the girl asked. Her voice was very small. It was the first thing she had said. "I expect so," Cole said. "But right now I am going to take you to somewhere warmer. Is that all right?" The boy looked at the girl, and then back at Cole. He was doing that thing children sometimes do, that rapid and surprisingly accurate assessment of whether an adult can be trusted. Cole waited. He had learned that patience in these situations was more valuable than anything else. "You have a gun," the boy said. "I do," Cole said. "Most men out here do. I will not use it unless something requires it. Nothing requires it right now." The boy considered this. Then he nodded, a small and serious nod. "My name is Thomas," he said. "This is my sister Clara." "Hello, Thomas," Cole said. "Hello, Clara." Clara looked at him and then buried her face in her brother's shoulder for a moment, then looked at him again. It was not unfriendly. It was just what a very young child does when the world is uncertain. Cole stood up slowly and came into the room. He looked at the fire and added 2 pieces of wood from the small stack beside the fireplace, enough to give it some life for the next few minutes. Then he looked around the room for what the children might need to take with them. There was not much. A small canvas bag that had been packed. Thomas had clearly been thinking ahead, with what looked like 2 or 3 items of clothing and a tin cup and a small object that Cole could not quite make out. There was a worn blanket that he folded and tucked under his arm. "Is there anything else you want to bring?" Cole asked. Thomas stood up and picked up the canvas bag and slung it over his shoulder with the practiced ease of a child who had been responsible for his own things for some time. Clara stood up too, and she reached up and took her brother's hand again, and then she looked at Cole and, with a gravity that was both tiny and enormous, reached up with her other hand. Cole looked at that small hand for a moment. Then he took it. Her hand was cold and very small in his. He walked with them to the door and out into the gray morning, and Clara held onto his hand the whole way. Her little fingers wrapped around 2 of his, trusting him completely in the way that only the very young and the very desperate can trust a stranger. He lifted Clara up onto the horse first, settling her in front of the saddle, and then helped Thomas up behind her. He tied the canvas bag to the saddle and took hold of the reins and led the horse on foot back down the trail toward town, walking beside them, keeping one hand on Clara's back to make sure she was steady. "Are you hungry?" he asked as they walked. "Yes," Thomas said, with the directness of a child who has been hungry long enough that there is no longer any embarrassment in admitting it. Cole reached into the side pocket of his saddlebag and found a piece of hard bread that he had bought 2 days ago and wrapped in cloth. He handed it up to Thomas, who broke it carefully in half and gave the larger piece to Clara without being asked. Cole noted this and said nothing. They walked in silence for a while. The wind had eased a little and the clouds had shifted, letting through a thin and watery kind of light that was better than nothing. The dry grass moved in waves around them, and somewhere in the distance a hawk was circling high up against the pale sky. "Where are you taking us?" Thomas asked. "Back to town," Cole said. "There is a woman at the general store. Her name is Martha. She will know what to do." "I do not want to go to the church," Thomas said. There was something in his voice when he said this, a tightness, a memory of something that had not gone well. "I will not take you to the church," Cole said. "I am not the church's errand boy." Thomas seemed to think about this. "All right," he said. Clara had been eating her bread in small, careful bites and looking out at the landscape around her with the wide eyes of a child for whom the world is still mostly new and surprising. She turned to look at Cole as they walked, studying his face with the frank and unguarded attention of a very young child. "You have scratches," she said, pointing at the old scar that ran along the left side of Cole's jaw. "I do," Cole said. "How did you get them?" "A long time ago," Cole said. "I was not being careful." Clara seemed to find this acceptable. She turned back to the landscape and ate another small bite of bread. When they came into Red Rock Crossing, the few people who were out on the street stopped and looked. Cole led the horse to the general store and helped the children down. Thomas landed lightly and immediately took Clara's hand again. Clara looked up at the buildings around her with wide eyes. Martha came out of the store before Cole even knocked. She must have been watching through the window. She looked at the children for a moment, and something moved through her expression, a softening, or perhaps a tightening, of some emotion she usually kept controlled. She crouched down to their level the way Cole had done. "Hello," she said. "Are you Thomas and Clara?" Thomas looked at Cole. Cole nodded. "Yes," Thomas said. "You must be cold and hungry," Martha said. "I have something on the stove that smells considerably better than this wind. Would you like to come inside?" Clara, who had been hiding behind Thomas, peeked out and looked at Martha. Something about the older woman, her directness, perhaps, or the plainness of her kindness, seemed to reassure her. She stepped out from behind her brother, still holding his hand, and nodded. Martha straightened up and looked at Cole. "Thank you," she said. "Their father is Walt Dolan," Cole said. "He went to Milford 4 or 5 days ago. Has not returned." Martha's expression shifted. "I know Walt Dolan," she said, in a tone that communicated several things at once without saying any of them directly. "I will send word to Milford." "The shack cannot be lived in," Cole said. "The back has come down and the front will follow before long." "I understand," Martha said. She looked at the children again. "Come inside," she said to them. "Leave the door open just a crack. The cat likes to come and go." Thomas looked up at Cole one more time, and there was something in his expression that was hard to read. Gratitude, perhaps, mixed with the particular kind of loss that comes from being helped by a stranger, because being helped by a stranger means that the people who should have helped you did not. "Thank you," Thomas said. Cole nodded. He watched them go inside, the door swinging mostly closed behind them, and he stood there for a moment in the wind and looked at the space where they had been. Clara had not said goodbye. She had gone inside without looking back, which was probably a good sign. Probably meant she had already decided that inside was safe. Cole told himself this. He untied his horse and led it to the trough at the side of the building to drink. He stood beside the horse and let it drink and listened to the sounds of the town around him. The creak of the sign in the wind, the distant sound of iron on iron from the blacksmith's, the low murmur of conversation from somewhere. He had intended to ride out today. He had what he needed from the store. He had no other reason to stay, and staying always led to complications. He thought about the road going west, about the possibility of work somewhere down that road, about the clean and uncomplicated feeling of moving. But he did not mount up. Instead, he stood beside his horse and thought about Thomas breaking the bread in half and giving the larger piece to Clara without being asked. He thought about a 6-year-old boy keeping a fire going for 2 nights in a half-collapsed shack. He thought about a small cold hand reaching up toward his in the gray morning light, trusting him with a simplicity that was almost impossible to look at directly. He tied his horse back at the post and went into the saloon. The saloon was nearly empty at this hour. There was a man asleep in the corner with his hat over his face, and there was a bartender polishing glasses without any particular energy. And there was the old man from the general store, sitting at a table near the window with a cup of something hot in front of him. The old man looked up when Cole came in. "You found them," he said. "I found them," Cole said. He sat down across from the old man. "They are with Martha." The old man let out a long breath. "Good," he said. "Good." He wrapped both hands around his cup. Their father should never have left them alone like that. "How long has the mother been gone?" Cole asked. The old man looked at him. "How did you know about the mother?" "The way the boy carries himself," Cole said. The old man nodded slowly. 2 years, give or take. Fever. It was hard on Walt. He was not a bad man before. He is still not a bad man, not exactly. He is a lost man. There's a difference, though sometimes it amounts to the same thing when you have children depending on you. Cole said nothing. "You are not from around here," the old man said. "No. Passing through. That is generally my way," Cole said. The old man looked at him for a moment. "You could find work here," he said. "There are ranches that need hands. The McAllister place, east of the ridge, lost 2 of their men to the California road this summer. They would be glad of someone who could ride and work." "I will think about it," Cole said. He did not stay long in the saloon. He went back out and walked his horse to the livery stable and arranged with the stable man to have it looked after for a night, paying the small fee without comment. He found a room above the saloon, the kind of room that was barely more than a cot and a window, and he lay down on the cot with his hat over his face and let the sounds of the town settle around him. He did not sleep. He lay and looked at the underside of his hat and thought about nothing in particular, which was something he had learned to do over the years, this deliberate emptying of the mind that was not quite rest, but was close enough. After a while he got up and went back to the general store. Martha was behind the counter again. The children were not visible, but he could hear, from somewhere in the back, the sound of Clara singing something. Not a real song, more the kind of tuneless singing that small children do when they are warm and safe and have been fed. "The boy asked about you," Martha said when Cole came in. Cole looked at her. "He asked where you went," Martha said. "I told him you were in town." Cole bought a tin of beans and a small jar of molasses and a second length of rope and paid for them without commenting on any of this. Martha took his money and counted out his change and then looked at him steadily. "You planning to ride out?" she asked. "Was thinking about it," Cole said. Said Martha, in the tone of a woman who has a great deal to say and is choosing not to say most of it. Cole picked up his purchases. He stood at the counter for a moment. "The father," he said. "Walt Dolan. What do you think happened?" Martha pressed her lips together. "I think he got to Milford and found a bottle and the bottle one," she said. "It has happened before. He always comes back eventually. Sometimes it takes longer than it should. And the children, in the meantime." "In the meantime, the children have me," Martha said, "and the town will look after them well enough. It is not a bad town. It is just a tired one." Cole nodded. He went back toward the door. "McAllister's place is 4 miles north of the East Trail," Martha said behind him. "Just follow the fence line. You cannot miss it." Cole went out without answering, but he noted the directions. He spent the rest of that day doing small things. He repaired a section of fence near the livery stable at the request of the stable man, who paid him in kind with an extra night's board for his horse. He ate a meal at the back table of the saloon, a plate of beans and salt pork that was not good but was hot. He watched the afternoon light change over the rooftops of the town and thought about the road going west and found, for reasons he did not entirely understand, that it held less pull for him than it usually did. The next morning, just after dawn, he rode north to the McAllister Ranch. It was a proper working ranch, bigger than most of what was in this valley, with a main house and a bunkhouse and several outbuildings, and a large corral where a dozen horses moved in the early light. There was smoke from the house chimney and the smell of coffee on the air, and when Cole rode up to the gate, a man came out of the bunkhouse and looked at him. "I heard you might be looking for hands," Cole said. The man who had come out of the bunkhouse was perhaps 50, with a square face and a careful expression. He looked Cole over the way experienced men do, taking in the horse, the gear, the condition of the saddle, and the way Cole sat in it. All of this in a few seconds. "You ride?" the man said. "Yes." "You work cattle?" "Yes." "You cause trouble?" "No." The man grunted. "Come and have coffee," he said. "We will talk." His name was Garrett McAllister, and he was the kind of man who said little but meant everything he said, which Cole found restful. Over coffee at the rough table in the main house, they discussed terms, wages, duties, length of arrangement, in the brief and economical language of men who have both done this kind of negotiation before and do not see the need to dress it up. Cole agreed to a month's trial. McAllister agreed to wages that were fair if not generous. Cole rode back to town to collect his things and pay his final night at the saloon. He stopped at the general store. Thomas was sitting outside on the step, whittling a stick with a small knife, with the focused and serious expression of a boy learning to do something with his hands. He looked up when Cole came up the walk. "You're still here," Thomas said. "For the time being," Cole said. He sat down on the step beside the boy. Thomas looked at him sideways and went back to his whittling. "Martha says you are going to work at McAllister's ranch," Thomas said. "Word travels fast in a small town," Cole said. "Clara asked if you were going to come back," Thomas said. He said it with the careful neutrality of a child who has learned to ask indirect questions as a form of protection. "I will be back to town regular enough," Cole said. "McAllister's is not far." Thomas nodded and scraped at the stick with a knife. He was not particularly skilled yet, but he was careful, which was more important. "Are you good at that?" Cole asked, nodding at the stick. "No," Thomas said honestly. "My papa showed me how, but I have not had much time to practice." Cole looked at the knife, a small, plain-handled thing that was decent quality but needed sharpening. "Can I see it?" Thomas handed it over. Cole tested the edge with his thumb and found it about as dull as he had expected. He reached into his jacket pocket and found the small whetstone he always carried and began to work on the blade with the easy and practiced motion of a man who has done this 10,000 times. Thomas watched. "You press here," Cole said, showing him the angle. "Consistent angle. That is the most important thing. Not how hard you press. The angle." Thomas watched with serious attention. Cole worked on the blade for a few minutes and handed it back. Thomas tested the edge the way Cole had, with his thumb, and his eyes widened slightly. "That is much better," he said. "Take care of your tools," Cole said. "They will take care of you." He stood up. "My papa has a whetstone," Thomas said. "I did not know what it was for." Cole nodded. "Now you do," he said. He went inside and settled with Martha and gathered his things and rode out to the McAllister Ranch. The work was what he had expected, hard and physical and straightforward in the way that ranch work usually is. There were fences to mend and cattle to move, and equipment to repair and horses to look after. Cole was good at all of this. He had spent enough years at it to do most of it without thinking, which left his mind free to be quiet, and a quiet mind was something he valued. The other hands were two young men, brothers from somewhere in the South, who were friendly in an uncomplicated way and did not ask him many questions, which he appreciated. McAllister himself came out to the range most days and worked alongside his men, which Cole respected. Cole fell into the rhythm of the ranch easily. He rose before dawn and went to bed after dark, and in between there was work, which was simple and sufficient. But he found himself, on the evenings when he rode into town to buy small things or have a meal, always stopping at the general store. And he found, almost every time, that Thomas was somewhere nearby, on the step, or in the yard, or just visible through the window, and that Clara, when she saw Cole coming, would come running out the door with the unself-conscious urgency of a very young child who is happy to see someone. She would crash into his legs and grab on, and he would look down at her, and she would look up at him with those wide dark eyes and say something. Cole, Cole, I saw a rabbit today, it was big. Or Cole, I learned a new song, do you want to hear it? And he would listen to whatever she had to say with the full and genuine attention that very young children require and rarely get. Thomas was more reserved, as older children often are, but he always came and stood nearby and found reasons to be in the same space. And he always had questions about the ranch, about the horses, about how things worked. He was a child with a deep appetite for information and a good memory, and Cole found himself talking to him more than he had talked to anyone in years. One evening, about 2 weeks after Cole had started at the McAllister Ranch, he came into town to find a different kind of energy in the street. People were gathered in small groups, talking in low voices, with the particular tension of people discussing something that has not yet resolved itself. He tied his horse and went to the general store. Martha was behind the counter, and her expression was the carefully controlled expression of a woman managing her emotions in front of others. Walt Dolan came back, she said before Cole could ask. Cole looked at her. He is at the saloon, Martha said. He came back 3 hours ago. He had been in Milford for 2 weeks. He is. She paused, choosing her word carefully. Not in a good state. Where are the children? Cole asked. Here, Martha said. I have not taken them out to see him yet. I wanted to. She stopped again. I wanted to talk to you first. Cole was slightly surprised by this. Why me? Martha looked at him steadily. Because you are the one they trust, she said, with the plain directness of a woman who deals in facts. Thomas has talked about you every day since you brought them in. Clara asks for you by name when she wakes up in the night. I did not plan this, and neither did you. But there it is. Cole was quiet for a moment. He is their father, he said. Yes, Martha said. He is their father. He is also a man who left 2 small children alone in a shack that was already in poor condition for 2 weeks, while he drank away whatever money he had in Milford. He is their father, and they love him, because children love their fathers regardless of whether those fathers deserve it, which is one of the great cruelties of the world. Cole said nothing. He was thinking about what he intended to do with this information, and he was not sure yet. I am not asking you to do anything, Martha said. I am just telling you, because you should know. Cole thanked her and went out and walked to the saloon. Walt Dolan was not difficult to identify. He was a man in his late 30s who looked 10 years older, sitting alone at a table with a glass in front of him that was not his first and not his last, looking at the wall with the hollow eyes of a man who is present in body, but somewhere else entirely in every other sense. He had dark hair going gray at the temples, and the same dark eyes as his children, and when Cole sat down across from him, he looked up slowly, as if focusing required effort. You are the man who found my children, Walt Dolan said. Yes, Cole said. Dolan looked at him. The look was complicated. There was shame in it and gratitude, and also something defensive. The instinctive bristling of a man who knows he has done wrong and is not yet ready to admit it cleanly. I was going to be back sooner, Dolan said. Cole did not respond to this. Dolan turned his glass on the table. I know what you are thinking. What am I thinking? Cole said. That I am a bad father, Dolan said. I am thinking, Cole said, that you have 2 children who are safe and well and who want to see you. I am thinking that you are sitting here instead of there. I am thinking that the gap between where you are and where you need to be is not very large, and that closing it is entirely within your ability, if you choose to. Dolan looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked back down at his glass. She would have known what to do, Dolan said. My wife. She always knew what to do. I do not know what to do. I have not known what to do since she died. I make decisions, and they are the wrong decisions, and I know they are the wrong decisions, but I make them anyway, because at least they are decisions. At least they are something to do. Cole sat with this. The shack is gone, Cole said. The back half is down, and the front will follow. You need somewhere to bring them. Dolan pressed his hands flat on the table. I know, he said. There's work at McAllister's, Cole said. He is a fair man. He would likely take you on if you came to him sober and in the morning. Dolan looked at him. You work for McAllister. I do. Why are you telling me this? Cole thought about Thomas on the step with his knife, giving the larger piece of bread to Clara without being asked, keeping the fire going for 2 nights. He thought about Clara's hand in his in the cold gray morning. He thought about what it meant to need your father and to have him present in body, but absent in everything that mattered. Because they need their father, Cole said. Not a better father, not a perfect father. Just their father, present and sober and trying. That is all they need. It is not a small thing, but it is not an impossible thing either. Dolan looked at his glass for a long time. Then he pushed it away. He did not say anything, but he pushed it away. Cole stood up. McAllister's gate is on the North Trail, for miles past the East Road, he said. Come in the morning. I will tell him to expect you. He walked back to the general store. Thomas was inside, sitting at the table in the back room with a book open in front of him that he was apparently not reading, because he looked up the moment Cole came through the door, and his expression was the expression of a boy who has been waiting. Is my papa here? Thomas asked. He is in town, Cole said. He is going to come and see you tomorrow, when he is more himself. Thomas absorbed this in silence. There was a great deal going on behind his eyes, but his face was still. Clara was asleep in the corner on a pile of blankets, curled up small with one hand under her cheek, and she looked in sleep the way all children do, fully at rest, fully trusting the world to be there when they woke up. Cole sat down across from Thomas. Is he all right? Thomas asked. He met his father. He will be, Cole said. Thomas looked at him with those careful eyes. You cannot know that, he said. No, Cole said. I cannot know it. I think it is true. I could be wrong. I have been wrong about people before. Thomas considered this. It was the kind of straight answer that children appreciate more than they are usually given credit for. He goes away sometimes, Thomas said. In his head. He has been doing it since Mama died. It is like he is there, but he is not there. I do not know how to explain it better than that. You explained it well, Cole said. Clara does not really remember Mama, Thomas said. He said it quietly, looking at his sister's sleeping form. She was very young. She remembers things, I think, but she does not know if they are real or if she made them up. I remember everything. Cole was quiet. Is it better to remember or to not remember? Thomas asked. He asked it with the genuine and serious curiosity of a child who wants to know, not as a rhetorical question. I do not know, Cole said honestly. I think it is different for everyone. I think remembering is hard, and not remembering is hard in a different way. Thomas nodded slowly. I think I am glad I remember, he said, even though it hurts. Because she was real. She happened. She should be remembered. Cole looked at this boy for a long moment, 6, 7 years old, sitting in the back room of a general store in a small frontier town, articulating something that most adults never get around to understanding. Yes, Cole said. She should be remembered. They sat together in a comfortable silence for a while, the way that people sometimes can after they have said something true together. Then Clara made a small sound at her sleep, and both of them looked at her, and she settled again, and Thomas let out a breath that was almost a laugh. She snores, he said. Does she know that? Cole asked. I told her. She said that was impossible. Thomas said. She said she was too small to snore. That is solid logic, Cole said. Thomas almost smiled. Cole stayed another half hour, and then rode back to McAllister's in the dark, following the trail by memory and the feel of the horse beneath him and the faint light of a quarter moon that came and went behind the clouds. He told McAllister the next morning about Walt Dolan, and McAllister listened without expression and said that if the man came to him sober and in the morning he would consider it. Walt Dolan came at 10 o'clock, sober and straight, and McAllister talked to him for 20 minutes in the yard and then told him to come back the next morning ready to work, and that he could have the small cabin at the back of the property that was currently being used for storage, if he could make it habitable, and that his children were welcome there. Cole helped Walt Dolan clear out the storage cabin that same afternoon. They worked without much conversation, moving boxes and old equipment and sweeping out the accumulated dust and debris of years. Walt Dolan worked hard and steadily and did not complain, and Cole noted this. "I'm going to do better," Dolan said, at one point, not looking at Cole, just looking at what his hands were doing. Cole did not say anything encouraging or discouraging. He just handed Dolan the other end of a heavy shelf, and they carried it out together. Thomas and Clara came to the McAllister ranch 3 days later, when the cabin was fit to live in and Walt Dolan had worked 3 days without incident. Martha drove them out in her wagon, sitting up straight on the seat with the children beside her, Clara holding her hand. Cole was in the corral when they arrived, working with a young horse that was still learning to accept a rider. He saw the wagon come through the gate, and he finished what he was doing. You do not stop in the middle of working with a young horse. It teaches the wrong lesson. And then he climbed out of the corral. Clara saw him before he had taken 3 steps. She climbed down from the wagon with a complete absence of caution, dropped the last 2 feet to the ground, and ran at Cole with the full and uncalculated speed of a 4-year-old who has located someone she is happy to see. He crouched down, and she crashed into him, and he caught her, and she grabbed his neck and held on. "Cole," she said, into his collar, with the muffled intensity of a small child expressing a large feeling. "Hello, Clara," he said. She leaned back and looked at his face, checking it the way children check, making sure it is what they remembered. "You smell like horses," she said. "That is almost certainly accurate," he said. Thomas had climbed down from the wagon with more dignity and was standing nearby, watching. Walt Dolan had come out of the cabin when he heard the wagon, and now he stood a few feet away, looking at his children with an expression that Cole did not look at directly, because it was the kind of expression that belongs to a person alone with themselves. Clara let go of Cole and ran to her father. Walt Dolan crouched down and caught her and held her, and he said her name, and Thomas walked over, and his father put one arm around him, and for a moment they were just a father and his 2 children, present and together, which was simple and which was everything. Cole stood and watched and felt something that he did not entirely have a name for. Martha came to stand beside him. "You did a good thing," she said quietly. "He did the hard part," Cole said, meaning Dolan. "Many people know what the hard part is," Martha said. "Fewer people do it. You helped him see it." Cole said nothing. He was watching Clara, who had her arms around her father's neck and was apparently telling him something very important about the ranch, about the horses, about everything she had seen in the last 60 seconds. "Are you planning to stay on at McAllister's?" Martha asked. "For the time being," Cole said. Said Martha. "He stayed 3 months at McAllister's, and in those 3 months the valley changed the way places change in winter and early spring, slowly, and then all at once, the frozen ground softening, the dry creek beginning to run again with snow melt from the hills, the grass coming back in thin and cautious green along the south-facing slopes." Walt Dolan worked hard and steadily and without incident. McAllister extended his employment without much discussion, just told him one morning that there was no reason to put a time limit on a thing that was working, and Dolan had nodded and gone back to work. He was still a quiet man, still a man who carried grief heavily, but he was present now in the way that mattered. Present at meals, present at bedtime, present when Clara woke up frightened in the night and needed someone to sit with her. Thomas had appointed himself a kind of unofficial helper to Cole, appearing whenever Cole had a task that could accommodate a second pair of hands, asking questions constantly, learning everything he could about horses and cattle and tools and rope and all the practical knowledge that the ranch had to offer. Cole answered his questions with the same careful directness he had used from the beginning, treating Thomas's curiosity as the serious and valuable thing it was. Clara had decided, in the matter-of-fact way of small children, that Cole was simply part of her world, and behaved accordingly. She brought him things, small rocks, interesting sticks, a beetle she had found near the water trough, and explained their significance with great seriousness, and Cole accepted each offering and listened to each explanation with full attention, because this is what the situation required, and because he found, somewhat to his own surprise, that he did not mind it at all. One afternoon in late March, Cole was sitting on the fence of the corral watching the horses, and Thomas came and sat beside him. They had developed a habit of this, sitting together in comfortable silence, which is a thing that not many people can do together, and which means something when it happens. After a while, Thomas said, "Are you going to leave?" Cole looked at him. The question was asked in the same careful neutral tone that Thomas used for things that mattered a great deal to him. "I have been thinking about it," Cole said honestly. Thomas was quiet. "I have been thinking about a lot of things," Cole said. Thomas looked at the horses moving in the corral. "Clara would cry," he said. "Not as an accusation, just as a fact." "I know," Cole said. "I would not cry," Thomas said. A pause. "But I would notice." Cole looked at this boy sitting beside him on the fence rail in the late afternoon light, serious and careful and brave in the particular way that children, who have had to be brave too young, are brave. Not because it is natural, but because they have learned that it is necessary. "I think I will stay a while longer," Cole said. Thomas nodded, as if he had expected this, as if, having asked, he had already accepted whatever the answer would be. But there was something in the set of his shoulders that changed slightly, a fraction of ease entering a posture that was usually somewhat braced against the world. "Okay," Thomas said. The evening came down over the valley slow and gold, the way spring evenings do in that country, and the horses moved in the corral, and the smoke from the cabin chimney rose straight up in the still air, and somewhere inside Clara was singing one of her tuneless songs, and the sound of it carried out into the evening, and Cole sat on the fence rail and listened and found that the road going west had very little pull on him at all. He had not expected this. He had not been looking for it. He had ridden into a valley going somewhere else entirely, and had stopped to see about 2 children in a damaged shack, and somewhere in the simple work of that, the walking back down the trail with a small hand in his, the sitting on the step while a boy learned to sharpen a knife, the catching of a 4-year-old who ran at him with her whole self, somewhere in all of that, the restlessness that had driven him from place to place for years had quietly, without announcement, without drama, set itself down and stopped. He did not know how long he would stay. He had never been a man who made long plans. But the question of where he would be tomorrow had a clear answer for the first time in a long time, and the answer was here, and that was enough. The smoke from the cabin went straight up into the clear evening sky, and the horses moved in the fading light, and Cole Hadley sat on the fence rail and listened to Clarice singing "Carry Out" into the spring air of the valley, and he was still.